My name is Baltasar Fernandez Manjón. I come from Complutense University, also here in Madrid, and I will present our work called eAdventure, Introducing Educational Games in the Learning Flow. The outline of the presentation will be a little bit talking about game-based learning and also about how to introduce games into the learning flow. This is a problem because when you change to a different type of content, you should provide some new pedagogy and some technical aspect. I will deal mostly with the technical aspect. I will present the eAdventure platform, how we are addressing these open issues, and also how are we evolving the eAdventure platform to address new aspects. And I will present some conclusions. The idea is that now there is an increased attention on games because, young people mostly are very keen on games. So you can use it for education. We are addressing very specific domains with a very high added value, such as the medical education domain, because of course it's a different kind of content that is much more expensive to produce. Of course, games has some advantages. The main advantage probably is motivation. Of course, students are very keen on playing games, at least some kind of students. And also, they are very much involved in this environment. But it is not clear how to go a little bit further from one game to a general strategy about how to use games. There are still too many open issues there. First, at the design stage, there is a problem about, a game is just for entertainment, or where is the educational value? So you have to find an adequate balance between these two aspects. And also, structure need to be considered into the process. Couldn't be something that is happening outside with no any implication of structure. If not, from our perspective, it doesn't work. And that means that you need to choose an appropriate game gender. At the production stage, there's a real problem. The first one is the cost. Of course, to produce a PDF file, it's much less expensive than to produce a game or a simulation. And also the reusability is very low because in most of the cases, the games are black boxes that are very difficult to deploy in the educational system, in the already existing infrastructure. Usually, games are very difficult to deploy in the already existing e-learning platforms, unless you are focusing on very specific kind of games, usually produced with Adobe technology. At the deployment stage, the structure, if you don't involve in structure usually tend to see the games as a problem because they don't know how to deal with this new language for them. Games are difficult to install, they need a very sophisticated computers. Usually many of the teachers has no idea of how to deal with the technical problems. Also, in many cases, that takes a lot of time, and so the instructors say, this is not for me, there's not enough time for playing with these games. And also, one of the problems is that all the educational system is focused on evaluation of the students. So, how are games improving the students' performance? What is the educational added value of these games. So usually now is you provide the games as you provide probably 15 years ago a simulation, and then you pass a test trying to measure if there is some gain there or not. But probably we can do it that a little bit better. We need to provide an integration into the learning environment and also try to address these issues. So we try to reduce the development costs. We need to involve instructors, and we need also to take into account the educational system where these games will be used. To increase the educational value and at the same time not obtaining a very high cost, we are focusing with an authoring tool that is where you don't need to program anything, and also maintenance and reusability. It's improved. I mean, our games can be open and modified to produce probably a different game, or a game that suits you better than the original one. So this kind of editors we are producing, this is all Java technology. It's already available, it's open code. You can download from SourceForge. So it's, something that is proficient with computer can produce a game. Also, in the same line, we have focused on a game gender that is more based on story than on action, because this is much easier to produce a game. So, and also it's promoting reflection and not action. The story is important. Do you have a story that is interesting, that is engaging, where the student can learn something? Okay, go ahead. But if not, probably a game is not the solution. And of course, it's necessary to obtain some patterns that could be useful and that could simplify and say, okay, that way you have not to think everything from scratch. Say, okay, I have a game, but which kind of game? And from experience, we have developed two very different kind of games. A first-person photo-based games for reducing the cost. To have something that is a very good drawing or designing is expensive, but everyone can take photos or very short videos. Okay, and that is very, very useful for medicine. Medical people usually don't like graphics because they need to be very precise. They prefer photos. But also you can produce more game kind of content for kids or wherever. So our games are, in many cases, when you see one of our games, probably you will not consider as a game, probably as a simulation with game-like situations. First-person photo-based games, like this one that has been used for teaching medical procedure. But also you have third-person games that is more a game as everyone will consider. And with this the development methodology, we try to introduce instructor in this methodology. So the instructor is who should decide which situations are relevant from the educational perspective. And the idea is that our tool helps you to, from a good story, not to produce a bad game, but it's up to you to have a good story from the very beginning. The idea is that eAdventure will help you in facilitating the deployment and assessment. Once that you have introduced some assessment rules into the system without no programming, I repeat that, the system will produce automatically assessment reports, and also the deployment is considered from the very beginning all the games that are quite complex with many graphics or photos or all the logic inside will be packed as a learning object that is automatically deployable in any learning management system such as Moodle, Sakai, etc. And also we are working very hard on the active integration using SCORM for having a bidirectional communication between the games and the system. So we are trying to produce a real integration of this kind of games with the learning management system, also taking into account the communication. So the games that you produce can be deployed in very, very different learning management systems. Also, we are considering some repositories, in this case, the one that you see, Agrega, that is the Spanish repository funded by the Ministry of Education, because we think that also some assets should be available, for instance, just to try if this is good or not for your approach. But we are still working on how to improve all these aspects that we are addressing in the project. And we are trying to decrease the cost of designing and implementing the game, how to better integrate into the existing systems. And, for instance, now we are working in the integration of eAdventure games with LAMS, with the learning management system that is based on activities from producing Macquarie University. That way, you can have a module that is a game in one of these educational sequence. We are also working on WIP, this writing environment for educational video games that is applying a visual domain-specific language for helping you to create a story. And this is the actual appearance of the present system. This is graphically you describe the story, and then the game is automatically produced. We are also working on one of the problems that the art asset is a problem. It's very expensive to produce. So we are working in also introducing into the system some assets to produce some games, and we expect to have this done in the next 6 months. And also we are working in a very different approach, that this is accessibility. One of the problems is that now many of these technologies are not accessible for people with special needs. And we are trying to implement accessibility, but at the authoring level, so the games can be made accessible with very low cost, with some limitation, but with a very low cost. And also we are still working on that, so we are now open to new suggestions and comments for the eAdventure 2. So please, if you are interested into this, provide us with your requirement, and we will try to address in the next version of the system. All the information is in eAdventure.eucm.es, and also there you have all the supporting papers and everything. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.